This is the presentation of our latest research results at the 20th International Conference on Web Engineering. We present an approach on how to apply a data container paradigm for publishing research datasets, which we call SolidRDP. The project was done at Chemnitz University of Technology in Germany and conducted together with my colleagues Dang Wu and Martin Getke. My name is André Langer, and I want to give you some insights in our research and findings. In order to start, let us have a look on a typical scenario on how research datasets are published nowadays. Therefore, let us imagine a researcher that we call Hannah, who is in possession of a research dataset. Hannah wants to share this research dataset following the FAIR principles so that other researchers, such as John, can find and reuse it for their own research. There are already existing services such as Zenodo, ResearchGate, Mendeley Data, or other data repositories that we can use for that. Apart from that, we have got directory services such as OpenDoor or the Registry of Research Repositories, or even crawlers such as the Google Dataset Search, where we can find published research datasets. The difficulty is that certain researchers hesitate to share their research datasets, either because these platforms are commonly run in a centralized fashion, where a researcher has the feeling that he or she is not in entire control of what happens there with the research data set, or these platforms are maybe also run with a commercial background. Recent surveys show that this concern is valid and that around 1/3 of the participants encourage obstacles when sharing research datasets. When you have a look in other surveys, such as the Wiley Open Science Researcher Insights Survey, they particularly ask for reasons why researchers are hesitant to share research, and we mainly face confidentiality issues and data privacy issues, that it's not entirely clear who will finally access this dataset. On the other hand, there is an upcoming trend that focuses on decentralizing certain services in the World Wide Web. On the next slide, we have got an example from Professor Verpoor with a blog article on decentralizing the web for good this time. The main idea of these developments is that we no longer want to use dedicated applications where we upload our data into it and face walled garden problems or difficulties when the service offer changes. But instead, we want to place the data in a location that we are somehow in control of and can then define applications and or users that are allowed to access this data. There are existing projects. One of these projects and specifications is called the Linked Data Platform-Based Approach, and a prominent representative for that is the SOLID project that proposes techniques as well as concepts on how to realize such a behavior. We were highly interested in such an approach because it was only tested in use cases such as sharing personal data or pictures or contacts in the past. We wanted to figure out how can we use such a linked data platform-based approach to publish research datasets actually. In order to do that, we faced the difficulty that the activity to publish research datasets was not trivial to transfer in a decentralized scenario. We first have to figure out what research data publishing actually means and which process steps are included in such an activity. Last but not least, when focusing a decentralized approach, we were interested from a data-driven point of view. What kind of data we have to provide so that other applications have all necessary information to publish and provide this data. So our third question was, what are data-driven aspects that we have to consider? In order to do that, we started with the current situation that we have mainly central-driven research data publishing scenario. Research data publishing is typically described as only one step in existing research data lifecycle models. In contrast to that, we identified multiple activities in this process that we want to point out here first. The first activity is the actual data transfer to a platform where our research dataset is accessible from the World Wide Web and provided in a persistent fashion. The next step is the actual data storage, which goes hand in hand with the persistent storage of the dataset itself. Then we normally have to describe a research dataset. We have to consider versioning aspects when we update a certain dataset, especially when we speak about persistent identifiers. And interestingly, we identified an explicit step which we call here data registration. Normally this step is done in an implicit way. We upload a dataset and directly annotate it, but it made sense from our point of view to define it as a separate step, that uploading a dataset and making the application aware of this dataset in order to combine it with some kind of additional annotation activity is done in a separate step. Then we have got some kind of data access control definition that's necessary, and the exposure, not of the dataset itself, but of related meta information to external services. And with this conceptual view on research data publishing, we suddenly have a mean to model it both from a centralized point of view as well as in a decentralized environment. And we have an advantage that we can model each of these steps in a component-oriented fashion. That means we are independent, or if we use existing tools to do, for instance, data annotation, versioning, or data transfer aspects. Based on that, we checked existing solutions for the non-centralized publication of a research dataset. We came across distributed solutions as well as decentralized solutions and defined requirements for an ideal solution that we would like to achieve. Git-based approaches, for instance, perform already very well, but even there certain aspects exist that we discuss in our paper in more detail. In contrast to that, we really wanted to test and figure out how a linked data platform-based approach, for instance, based on the Solid platform, can compare in comparison to these approaches. The Solid platform itself already introduces a concept that's called a personal online storage, which is a storage environment where we can place data. We extend this concept and want to speak about a ResearchPOD as soon as we place research datasets inside such a personal data store. Apart from the data set itself, we need for each of the described activities certain additional information, such as descriptive meta information, versioning information, access control information, or even exposure information. In order to combine this information for a particular dataset, we propose the usage of data containers. Containers itself are already known from, for instance, the Docker community, but are also somehow established in data sciences. But from our perspective, it makes sense to use such a container-based approach to place a dataset with additional information here, or data sets that are created within a certain research project. Okay, and then we sketch the concept for an application that implements all the components that we described in our conceptual model that I just described here, and can interact with the Solid-based platform where a researcher can manage a dataset in such a ResearchPOD. In the following, my colleague Dan Wu will provide you some insights into the prototypical implementation of this SolidRDP application.
In order to use the application, you need first to provide your ResearchPOD location. If you don't have one, you can create a new one. There's a link here for you to learn how to create a new one. And if you already have one, you can go on. Because the SolidRDP needs a permission to access your ResearchPOD, you need first to authenticate yourself by logging into your Solid server, and then you can do the authorization to give the SolidRDP the access permission. You only have to do it once in the first time, and because I already did it, so I just need to log in. After the successful authentication and authorization, you are now able to use all the component and functionality of the SolidRDP application. With the SolidRDP application, you are now free to organize your ResearchPOD. You can create the folder or the subfolder to store your dataset, and you can use the data transfer component in order to upload a single or multiple dataset to your ResearchPOD. You can also use the built-in data annotation tool to annotate and create a meta description for your dataset. Because the datasets are not static, it can be changed in the future. Therefore, the SolidRDP provides the basic data versioning control in order to manage multiple versions of your dataset. Moreover, to warranty for the data ownership, the SolidRDP provides to the user the full data access control. The user can decide who can access and what are the permissions like read, write, or append or control. Last but not least, the user can export their data and make it visible to other researchers by indexing their metadata in the searchable data source.
In order to evaluate our proposed solution, we used the following evaluation strategy. First, we provided SolidRDP as a proof of concept to show that our concept basically works in practice. Then we ran a lab study with around 15 participants that had to accomplish certain tasks with this prototypical implementation. We systematically observed what they did and provided a questionnaire to them, which we evaluated afterwards. And last but not least, we discussed the achievement of all defined objectives afterwards, following an objectives-based evaluation in our paper. The objectives that we were focusing on are these 7 that you can see here in the presentation. We were able to justify that the ownership of the data storage is given them in a better way than using a centralized platform. This was confirmed by all our test participants. It's possible to work with multiple research data sets of different format, shape and size in such a ResearchPOD. Metadata integration is given by using certain metadata annotation components. Users can be assisted in their usage of the SolidRDP application, and we have the possibility to interact with external systems. A data versioning system and the provision of post-system identifiers is given. We rely on a solid-based platform to realize data access control. And last but not least, we can provide additional information along with the particular meta information to describe a research dataset, which can then be exchanged with external services in a linked data fashion. To summarize our presentation, our main contribution is a conceptual model for research data publishing that we described with multiple steps that are involved in this process. Next, we show the data container-based approach, how we can place a research dataset or multiple datasets in such a ResearchPOD. And last but not least, we provide SolidRDP as some kind of web application that works in a component-oriented fashion to realize such a decentralized research dataset publishing behavior. So far, SolidRDP is not established as an independent and widely used platform, so in the future we first want to investigate each involved component in detail, provide a platform in an established fashion to the entire community. We are interested in the alternative view on how to discover datasets that are provided inside these research data pods. And last but not least, we want to integrate our solution into existing research environments to not entirely reinvent the wheel. Last but not least, I want to thank you for your attention that you were watching this video. There's also a short version of this video available, which you can find in the description section of this video. Thanks a lot.